Larry Hoover's story began on the streets of Chicago. He was born in Mississippi but moved to Chicago as a child. In the turbulent 1960s, he emerged as a charismatic leader. He co-founded the Supreme Gangsters, which later merged with a rival group. This merger created the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, often shortened to Gangster Disciples. Hoover, known as King Larry, quickly rose to the top. His influence grew, and the organization became a powerful force in Chicago's underworld. The Gangster Disciples controlled significant portions of the city's drug trade and were involved in various criminal enterprises, establishing a formidable presence. The Gangster Disciples under Hoover's leadership expanded their reach beyond mere street thuggery. They developed a sophisticated structure, almost corporate in its organization. There were roles, rules, and a clear hierarchy. Hoover envisioned the GDs as more than just a gang. He sometimes spoke of growth and development, a backronym for GD, suggesting a move towards community initiatives and legitimate businesses. This duality of a criminal enterprise with aspirations of social good became a hallmark of his public persona. This complex image made him a controversial figure from the very start of his reign on the streets. However, the violence associated with the gang was undeniable and pervasive throughout their operations. Rivalries led to bloodshed, and communities were caught in the crossfire. Hoover's leadership, while perhaps aiming for some form of order within the chaos, ultimately presided over a period of intense gang activity. Law enforcement agencies began to focus intensely on dismantling the Gangster Disciples' operations. Hoover himself became a prime target. His name was synonymous with organized crime in Chicago, a figure both feared and, in some quarters, respected for his audacity and control. The authorities were determined to bring him down. His initial major conviction came in 1973. Hoover was found guilty of ordering the murder of William Pookie Young, a 19-year-old drug dealer. This crime resulted in a sentence of 150 to 200 years in state prison. Even from behind bars in the Illinois state system, authorities alleged that Hoover continued to manage the Gangster Disciples. They claimed his influence remained potent, his orders relayed through various channels, maintaining his grip on the organization's vast network. This assertion would follow him for decades, shaping the narrative of his incarceration and his subsequent federal charges. Decades after his state murder conviction, Larry Hoover faced new sweeping federal charges. In 1995, a lengthy investigation culminated in his indictment for running a criminal enterprise from prison. The federal government argued that Hoover, despite being incarcerated, was still the undisputed leader of the Gangster Disciples. They presented evidence of his continued orchestration of drug trafficking, extortion, and other illicit activities across multiple states. This federal case aimed to permanently neutralize his influence. The prosecution painted him as a master manipulator who used his prison cell as a command center for a nationwide criminal empire. The federal trial was a significant event, drawing national attention to Hoover and the Gangster Disciples. In 1997, he was convicted on these federal charges. The court handed down 6 life sentences, to be served consecutively with his existing state sentence. This effectively meant he would never see the outside world again, barring extraordinary circumstances. Hoover was subsequently transferred to ADX Florence in Colorado, the nation's most secure supermax prison, designed to house inmates deemed the most dangerous and in need of the tightest controls. His confinement there was under the most restrictive conditions imaginable for any inmate. Then, in a surprising development, on May 28, 2025, President Donald Trump commuted Larry Hoover's federal life sentences. Hoover was 74 years old at the time, though his attorneys later stated he was 75. This act of executive clemency specifically addressed the federal convictions from 1997. The news sent ripples through legal circles and communities familiar with Hoover's long and notorious history. For his supporters, it was a moment of vindication, a sign that their decades-long pleas for his release from federal custody had finally been heard by the highest office in the land. The Bonjean Law Group, representing Hoover, celebrated the commutation. They stated, "Larry Hoover's federal life sentences have been commuted by President Donald Trump." They emphasized the harshness of his nearly 3 decades in solitary confinement. The legal team highlighted their belief that the courts had been unwilling to acknowledge Hoover's personal growth and rehabilitation. President Trump's action, they argued, delivered a measure of justice. This commutation meant Hoover would be released from federal custody, a significant step, though not the final chapter in his legal saga due to his outstanding state obligations. For nearly 30 years, Larry Hoover endured the extreme conditions of solitary confinement at ADX Florence. This facility is often described as a prison within a prison, reserved for inmates considered too dangerous for even maximum security populations. Inmates there spend at least 23 hours a day locked in small, soundproof cells. Contact with the outside world is severely limited, and interactions with other prisoners are virtually non-existent. Hoover's legal team described ADX Florence as the most restrictive, draconian supermax prison in the United States, underscoring the severity of his daily existence for such a prolonged period of his life. His attorneys consistently argued that Hoover had undergone significant personal transformation during his decades of incarceration. They painted a picture of a man who had renounced his past and was committed to positive change. The Bonjean Law Group asserted that the courts have demonstrated a complete unwillingness to consider Mr. Hoover's considerable growth and complete rehabilitation. They pointed to his age, now 75, and the sheer length of time spent in isolation as factors that should have merited a re-evaluation of his sentence, particularly the federal one which was imposed long after his initial imprisonment. The push for Hoover's release gained vocal support from some high-profile figures in the entertainment industry. In 2021, rappers Kanye West, now Ye, and Drake put aside their own feud to perform at a benefit concert. The Free Larry Hoover concert, sponsored by Amazon and organized by music executive Jay Prince, was held at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Its explicit purpose was to raise awareness and advocate for Hoover's release from his federal sentence. This event brought mainstream attention to his case, framing it as an issue of potential injustice and the need for prison reform. These supporters, including his family and legal team, argued that Hoover had paid his debt to society, especially considering the harshness of his solitary confinement. They contended that he was no longer a threat and that his continued incarceration, particularly under such restrictive federal conditions, served no further punitive or societal purpose. The commutation by President Trump was seen by this camp as an acknowledgement of these arguments. They believed his pleas, amplified by influential voices, were finally heard, leading to what they termed a just decision regarding his federal punishment. Despite President Trump's commutation of his federal life sentences, Larry Hoover is not a free man. He still faces the formidable 150 to 200-year state sentence in Illinois for the 1973 murder of William Pookie Young. The federal commutation specifically addresses the 1997 convictions for running a continuing criminal enterprise. Therefore, Hoover is expected to be transferred from ADX Florence in Colorado back to the Illinois Department of Corrections. His release from federal custody simply means he moves to continue serving his state time, a sentence that, on its own, makes his eventual freedom highly improbable without further legal or executive action at the state level. Hoover's case remains deeply controversial, splitting public opinion and law enforcement perspectives. On one side, authorities and many in communities ravaged by gang violence allege that he continued to exert control over the Gangster Disciples from prison for many years. They view him as a dangerous figure whose influence, even diminished, could still inspire criminal activity. From this viewpoint, his lengthy sentences are entirely justified, and any form of release is a potential threat to public safety. They point to the gang's legacy of violence and drug trafficking as reasons why he should remain incarcerated for the rest of his life. Conversely, Hoover's supporters, including his family, legal team, and figures like Kanye West, argue that he is a reformed man. They contend that he has been unfairly targeted and that his prolonged solitary confinement constitutes a violation of his human rights. Some in certain communities even view him as a kind of Robin Hood figure, someone who, despite his illicit activities, provided a form of structure or even aid in neglected neighborhoods. They believe he has served more than enough time, especially under the brutal conditions of Supermax, and that his continued imprisonment under the state sentence is unjust. Larry Hoover's story has undeniably permeated American pop culture, further complicating his public image. He has been referenced in numerous rap songs, most notably by Rick Ross in the track BMF, Blowin' Money Fast, which glorified a certain lifestyle associated with figures like Hoover. This cultural portrayal often romanticizes his power and influence, sometimes overshadowing the violent realities of gang life. His name continues to evoke strong reactions, a testament to his enduring, albeit contentious, legacy as a kingpin, a symbol of a broken justice system for some, and an unrepentant criminal mastermind for others.